The sterile hum of the hospital filled the air as Ariana stood at the head of the busy ICU, overseeing her team with an air of calm confidence. As the medical director, she had seen it all: intense moments, life or death decisions. But today, the tension wasn't coming from a patient's condition. Dr. Thomas, a senior surgeon with decades of experience, stormed in, his eyes cold and accusing. "You're not cut out for this role," he spat, his voice cutting through the air. "You don't have what it takes to lead a team like this." Ariana, unfazed, met his gaze with unyielding composure. She had fought her way to this position, earning her place with hard work and expertise. But Dr. Thomas, blinded by his biases, couldn't see that. His assumptions about her age, her gender, and the way she carried herself seemed to make her an easy target. The other doctors around them seemed to hold their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would Ariana back down or fight back? Would the deep-rooted injustice of the system allow her to rise above? Ariana had worked tirelessly to earn her position as the medical director of St. Andrew's Hospital. At just 35, she had climbed the ranks, battling not only the demanding nature of her profession, but also the deep-seated biases that often undermined her abilities. Years of sleepless nights, grueling shifts, and difficult decisions had shaped her into a leader who commanded respect. Yet, despite her credentials and expertise, there were those who still doubted her. Dr. Thomas was one of those people. A senior surgeon in his mid-50s, he had spent decades in the field, but with his experience came an arrogance that clouded his judgment. His condescending tone whenever he spoke to Ariana was hard to ignore, and today was no exception. As he passed by her office, he couldn't help but voice his criticism loudly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "You're not fit for this position," Dr. Thomas said, shaking his head in disbelief. "The hospital needs a more experienced leader. You should stick to what you know." Handling the paperwork, Ariana's face remained unreadable, but internally, her blood began to boil. His words were not just an attack on her abilities, but a reflection of his deep-rooted prejudice. It was clear that he saw her youth and gender as weaknesses, something to undermine in a field dominated by older men like him. As the exchange unfolded, several nurses and staff members, including a few of Ariana's colleagues, began to gather in the hallway, exchanging nervous glances. The tension in the air was palpable, but amidst the growing discomfort, Samantha, a compassionate nurse and one of Ariana's closest friends, stepped forward, offering a quiet but supportive voice. "You don't have to take this," Samantha whispered, her eyes full of concern. "Maybe it's time you stand up to him. Show him that you belong here." Ariana's fingers tightened around the edge of her desk. Samantha's words echoed in her mind. Was it time to confront the arrogance that threatened her position? Or would she let the tension fester until it consumed her? The hospital, like any large institution, thrived on gossip. What started as a quiet exchange between Ariana and Dr. Thomas quickly snowballed as the nurses gathered in the break room. Word spread like wildfire. Dr. Thomas had belittled Ariana. They were shocked, and many found it hard to believe, considering Ariana's composed nature and her reputation as a skilled leader. The younger nurses whispered amongst themselves, some even shaking their heads in disbelief. They had never seen Ariana so visibly shaken, and the idea that a senior doctor could treat her like that didn't sit well with them. The shock wasn't just from the attack on Ariana, but from the realization that they had no idea who she really was. Ariana, in her office, stared out of the window, the quiet hum of the hospital filling the space around her. Her mind replayed Dr. Thomas's harsh words over and over. She had always known that being a woman of color in such a high-ranking position would bring challenges, but this felt different, like the problem was far bigger than just him. His arrogance, his blatant disregard for her authority, were symptoms of a cultural issue that ran deeper within the walls of St. Andrew's. She clenched her fists. Was this how things would always be? Meanwhile, in the nurse's station, Maya, a seasoned senior nurse who had seen it all, gathered the younger nurses around. She wasn't one to gossip, but in this case, she felt it was important. With a knowing look, she spoke in a low voice. "Listen, Ariana isn't just a nurse. She's the medical director here. You know, the one who makes the tough calls, not just the one filing papers or handing out medication. There was a moment of stunned silence as the realization hit the younger staff like a cold wave. Some looked ashamed, others embarrassed. They had no idea that Ariana had earned such a position of power, and it made Dr. Thomas's behavior seem even worse. But Dr. Thomas, he remained oblivious. That afternoon, as he passed by a group of staff members, he brushed off the entire confrontation with a smug laugh. It was just a misunderstanding, he muttered dismissively. She's too sensitive. Anyway, no harm done. Let's move on. His lack of self-awareness only served to fuel the growing resentment. He hadn't realized that his actions had crossed a line, and in doing so, he had exposed not just his own biases, but a deeper issue within the hospital. Ariana sat at her desk, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on her shoulders. She had always known that leadership wasn't just about making decisions for patients. It was about creating a culture, one that respected everyone, regardless of their background or position. As her pen hovered over the report she was drafting, she made a decisive choice. She wasn't going to let this incident with Dr. Thomas slip under the rug. This wasn't just about a personal affront. It was about a deep-seated problem that permeated the entire hospital, a problem that she was determined to fix. Her report would be different. Rather than focusing solely on Dr. Thomas's behavior, she planned to highlight the systemic issues within the hospital, biases, inequities, and the lack of respect for leadership that didn't fit the traditional mold. Ariana wasn't interested in small reforms. She wanted to bring about real change. She carefully outlined the steps needed to confront these issues: improve communication between departments, mandatory training on diversity and respect, and most importantly, a cultural shift where merit and respect were valued over seniority or preconceived notions of authority. As she typed, the thought of the uphill battle ahead weighed on her. She knew this wasn't going to be easy. The hospital was steeped in its traditions, and not everyone was on board with the idea of change. Over the next few days, she started encountering murmurs of resistance in the halls. A few senior staff members questioned the need for any formal action, dismissing the incident with Dr. Thomas as just a misunderstanding. "We've been doing things this way for years, Ariana," one of the hospital's department heads had said with a shrug. "Maybe it's just the nature of things. People don't change that easily." But Ariana wasn't backing down. Her strategy was clear. She was going to push through the resistance and make her voice heard. This wasn't just about one doctor. It was about setting a precedent for the future of the hospital. If she could lead them through this moment, maybe, just maybe, she could change the culture that had held them back for so long. The day had arrived. The boardroom was filled with the hospital's top management, a room where decisions were made that could affect the future of everyone in the building. Today, however, the stakes were different. Today, Ariana was going to ensure that Dr. Thomas's behavior wouldn't be ignored. The meeting began, and Dr. Thomas walked in with his usual air of confidence, as if he were untouchable. He barely glanced at Ariana as he took his seat at the table, his arrogance as palpable as ever. Ariana could feel the tension in the room, the weight of everyone's expectations on her shoulders. She was ready for this. Dr. Thomas wasted no time in defending himself. "I understand that there's been some discomfort," he began, his voice smooth, but laced with defensiveness. "But in a hospital, we need to maintain order and efficiency. Sometimes, that requires a direct approach. The team needs leadership, and if that means being firm, so be it." Ariana listened carefully, but inside, she was preparing to make her move. His words didn't sit right with her, and it was clear to everyone in the room that his actions weren't rooted in leadership. They were rooted in power and control. Finally, with poise and a sense of calm that only someone in her position could have, Ariana spoke up. "What you fail to understand, Dr. Thomas, is that respect is a cornerstone of leadership. What you did in the hallway wasn't about leadership. It was about belittling me in front of staff. You didn't simply question my judgment. You used your position to diminish me in front of everyone, disregarding not only my role, but my experience." The room grew quiet. Dr. Thomas's face shifted as he tried to mask the shock on his face. But Ariana wasn't finished. "What you didn't know," she continued, her voice firm, "is that I am the medical director of this hospital. There was a long pause. Dr. Thomas blinked, clearly taken aback by the revelation. His defensiveness melted away as he began to understand the gravity of his error, realizing how deeply his actions had cut. The silence was broken by his hesitant voice. "I'm sorry. I didn't." The apology felt rushed, forced, and lacking sincerity. Ariana nodded, but she wasn't moved by the words. Her focus wasn't on him, but on the bigger picture. She turned to the boardroom, addressing the group. "This isn't about one person's mistake. This is about a culture where respect, understanding, and fairness are sidelined for the sake of authority. We need to change that for all of us." The meeting had ended, but the reverberations of what had transpired continued to echo through the halls of the hospital. Just hours after the confrontation, the hospital management took immediate action. The announcement was clear and swift. New policies were being put into place, and they would affect every single person in the organization. Ariana's words had sparked a shift, one that couldn't be ignored. A mandatory diversity and anti-bias training program would now be required for all staff, from the most senior doctors to the entry-level employees. The hospital's leadership was making it clear. Things were going to change, and change would start now. Ariana didn't just sit back and watch. She became an active force in shaping the policies, ensuring that they were more than just a set of guidelines to check off. She fought to make sure the changes addressed the root of the issue, going beyond token gestures to create a lasting, meaningful transformation. These policies would not just tackle unconscious biases. They would set the groundwork for a hospital culture that celebrated respect, inclusion, and equality. The shift was slow at first, but it was undeniable. Small, yet significant, changes began to emerge. In the break room, nurses and doctors now took time to listen to one another, engaging in conversations that were once brushed aside. Staff members were beginning to reflect on their own biases and started to recognize how they had, unknowingly, participated in the problem. Ariana watched as this transformation unfolded, a quiet satisfaction growing within her. This wasn't just about changing the hospital. It was about setting a new standard, one that would affect not just those working in the building but the patients they served as well. A new culture of respect, of inclusion, was beginning to take shape, and Ariana knew this was only the beginning. The hospital had turned the tide, and it would never be the same again. Dr. Thomas's transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. At first, he approached the mandatory diversity training with reluctance, viewing it as a mere formality rather than a genuine opportunity for change. His resistance was evident in the way he slouched in his chair during the sessions, arms crossed, eyes glazed over. But as the days went by and the training challenged his assumptions, a shift began to happen. Slowly, he started to recognize the depth of his arrogance, the way he had belittled Ariana and, in turn, undermined the value of countless others who worked tirelessly alongside him. He saw how his behavior had not only hurt Ariana, but had also contributed to a toxic atmosphere that discouraged open dialogue and mutual respect. For the first time, he understood the true impact of his actions, and it began to weigh heavily on him. Meanwhile, Ariana's role as a catalyst for change became more pronounced. Her quiet strength and unwavering commitment to fostering a healthier hospital environment began to earn her the respect she deserved. The staff, particularly those who had witnessed the painful confrontation with Dr. Thomas, began to view her in a new light. She was no longer just the medical director. She was a symbol of resilience and leadership. Nurses and junior doctors, who had previously been hesitant or intimidated, began approaching her for advice, guidance, and support. Ariana didn't just answer their questions. She listened, empathized, and encouraged them to voice their concerns. This shift in dynamics wasn't confined to Ariana's relationships alone. The hospital's culture, once governed by an outdated and rigid hierarchy, began to evolve. Conversations about race, respect, and fairness became more common, no longer relegated to hushed tones or uncomfortable silences. It was clear that the focus was no longer on who held the most power, but on how to create an environment built on mutual respect, understanding, and support. Ariana's influence was undeniable. Her vision for a more inclusive, compassionate hospital was taking root, and with every passing day, It was becoming more and more of a reality. The hospital and its people were changing for the better. As Ariana stood in the hospital's courtyard, watching the staff interact more openly and respectfully, she couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. It wasn't just the policies that had changed, it was the culture itself. The subtle shift in how staff treated each other, the way conversations about respect and inclusion were no longer avoided, filled her with hope. But Ariana knew that this was just the beginning. The new policies were an important step, but they meant nothing without action. The real work lay in ensuring these changes were enforced, embraced, and sustained by every member of the hospital team. It would take time, patience, and relentless commitment. In her final reflection, Ariana spoke to the staff during a hospital-wide meeting. "The work we've done here is important," she said, her voice steady but firm, "but it's just the beginning. True change happens when we hold ourselves accountable and when we stand together against discrimination and bias. Each of us has a role to play, not just in our workplace, but in shaping a world where respect and inclusivity are the norm, not the exception." Her words echoed in the room, leaving a lasting impact. Ariana's call to action wasn't just about transforming a hospital, it was about transforming a culture. The story ended with a message of hope, that with unity, understanding, and collective effort, true change was possible. It was a call for everyone to continue challenging discrimination and to embrace a future where inclusivity was a given, not a goal. As you reflect on Ariana's journey, think about your own workplace or environment. How do you treat others? And how can you contribute to a culture of respect and inclusion? Change starts with each of us. Share this story with your friends, family, and colleagues to raise awareness about workplace discrimination and the importance of embracing diversity. Together, we can create environments where everyone feels valued and respected. Remember, together, we can break down barriers and create a culture where everyone is treated with the respect they deserve. Let's make that vision a reality, one step at a time.